Great to see a lot of familiar faces here. This is a very special event to us because this release is to this small, relatively close to us private group of people. And we are super excited about the new functionalities that we are going to release today. And let's get started. You all can see my screen, Anurag? Deepti? Okay,
Yes,
cool.
yes, you can see.
Perfect. Let's get started then. All right. So today we are going to talk about the new features that we have been building at True Foundry to help companies supercharge their GenAI efforts. And how do you actually derive business value out of running LLMs at scale, being able to overall take your LLM applications from demo to production, right? That's what we'll talk about with the new features that we're launching. Before we get started, let's briefly introduce the team. So I'll start by introducing my co-founders, Anurag and Abhishek. So Abhishek used to be at Facebook, where he worked three years out of New York and 3 years out of Menlo Park, and he led the entire videos org. Anurag comes in from a hedge fund background. A lot of you have also spoken to him through our conversations, user research and all. He used to be leading one of the portfolios within WorldQuant, and also was a member of CEO office who helped expand the company to 22 different countries. Whereas a little bit about myself, I have been working in conversational AI at Meta, and also led the machine learning team at a startup called Reflection, where we built out recommendation systems. Besides us, our team, engineering team, primarily comes from companies like Amazon, Gojek, Postman, etc., having built ML platforms themselves. And we are also fortunate to have the backing of some of the very prominent investors like Sequoia, ENIAC, Naval Ravikant, and ML platform builders at companies like Google, Snowflake, and Facebook. And our goal as True Foundry is to make machine learning available to every company in a relatively seamless way. So the reason why we are doing this launch today is because we have been talking to a lot of our customers and seeing the adoption of generative AI up close, really talking to people, how they're thinking about the applications, how they're even prioritizing what applications to build out, what are the ways that people are getting started, what are the ways that people are launching things to production. So we have collected a lot of these insights working with some of the customers very closely. Some of them are super fast moving startups, mid-market, and some of them are very large Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies that we are working very closely with. And it's great to see the journey that all these companies are traveling in the last 6 months, right? And a lot of these insights are actually built on the use cases that we have launched together with them, and the production applications that we have built out together with them. So I'm super excited to share these insights with you all. Before we go any further, I want to ask one question to all of us here in the audience, that would love to understand what stage of LLM journey is your company in? And of course, we are seeing a huge temporality to this in our conversations with our customers as well. Nice. So we have gotten a lot of answers so far. We'll keep it on for 10 more seconds. Nice. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and share the results with you all. So yeah, roughly over 50% folks are in the stage where they are experimenting with OpenAI. It's a thing that we're seeing a lot, with the customers that we speak with. Some of us have also started experimenting with open source models. Some of us have launched these applications, and a few of us are already reaching the stage where we are fine tuning the models and stuff. Cool, awesome. So let's keep going. So this is going to be our agenda for today. We will start with sharing the insights that we are learning through the conversation that we have with our customers and the rest of the industry that we get a chance to speak with. And obviously the highlight of today is going to be the products that we are going to release today, and also give you a live demo of the features that we're launching as well. Besides that, we'll show you some of the actual concrete customer stories about how our customers are using these features that we are releasing today to build out their own generative AI applications. We'll keep time for questions, Q&A, and then we have a surprise in the end. Let's get going. All right. So let's dive deep into some of the insights that we are gathering. And before we do that, let's just set the ground state, which I think is also founded in the poll that we launched just a minute ago, right? That what's the state of LLM development today? So number one, that most of us have realized that this is not one of the technologies that's like actually not delivering business value, right? Clearly, LLMs are already starting to release to deliver business value, either in terms of saving cost or in terms of increasing revenues, reach to their customers and stuff like that. So like pretty much the world is convinced that it's adding value to their business use cases, right? The second observation here is that this is a super fast moving space, right? We are seeing like new open source models getting released every day, domain specific models getting released every day, from extremely large models with very abstract capabilities to very small models that can run on our mobile phones, all these different context windows and stuff like that, right? So we are seeing that the space is evolving very, very fast, which basically means some engineering challenges at our end. How do we choose the best model? How do we choose them optimally with respect to cost and stuff like that, right? Besides that, almost all the companies that are working in the space are realizing that it requires a lot of investments to build LLM applications. Like building the demo is fairly straightforward, but when you start going to production, you start realizing that you might need to fine tune these models, and for that data collection is a pain, or data generation is a pain, and then running these jobs, making sure that your models are efficiently fine tuned. All of that are the type of problems that people are starting to run into now, right? Whereas some of the applications are already serving and adding business value. We expect a few things to change as we are seeing companies that are ahead in their journey. We are noticing the kind of problems that they are facing, and our understanding is that those problems will become more widespread. More of us who are early in our journey, who are building the demos with OpenAI or other closed source models for that matter, are likely going to run into some of these challenges. So let's talk a little bit about that as well, right? So number one, we used to say this in traditional machine learning. I think a lot of us might have seen the architecture where you have this very huge ML architecture diagram where machine learning model is like a really small part of it, right? Like 5% of the entire architecture. And then we say that, okay, there's so many other things, your data pipelines, your infrastructure, your model training, your offline jobs, your model serving, your model monitoring, and stuff like that. There were a lot of components that come together to build a machine learning model, machine learning application, right? To be honest, large language models are not any different, right? They're also machine learning models, and people are realizing that you don't build LLM applications with LLM standalone. You actually need a lot of things to come together. These are like basic things, but when you start moving things to production, you realize that you have to add a lot of small knobs to make the application actually production ready. The second thing which we feel is happening with the LLM space much more than almost 10x, even 100x more than traditional machine learning applications, that cost scale up very, very quickly. Number one, if you're using your closed source models, then this per token based pricing for your entire data sets across all your customers adds up really, really fast. If you're trying to run things in your own infrastructure, then optimizing how you fine tune these models, train these models, serve these models are becoming a pain. And of course, with GPU shortage, cloud providers are sometimes charging exorbitant amounts of money for the GPU as well. So all of that adds to the problem of building LLM applications. One other observation that we have had in the space is most companies started off building their LLM applications which were lower risk applications, right? So not directly dealing with customer data, not directly building user facing applications, something which is more internal, something which is less risky, right? As they're getting into the zone of, okay, more serious applications, they're realizing that privacy is becoming critical. Data is the actual moat. They can't actually be sharing data with a lot of other closed source providers or other hosted solutions. So that's becoming top of mind. at least like, a lot of compliance related discussions are happening with the enterprises that we speak with. And the inherent challenges of scaling machine learning applications is again super accentuated when it comes to large language models, right? Same thing, like, running a model itself is large enough that it won't fit into a single GPU. How do you do multi-node training? How do you do multi-node serving? Are the kind of challenges that people are facing. There's a couple of other things which are unique in this domain that are happening. Okay. One is we are seeing that cross cloud is suddenly starting to become more and more of a commonplace thing. And I'll describe why we are seeing this. So pre-LLMs, it's almost like, across cloud providers, they had equivalent component of every part in the tech stack, basically. So almost choice of cloud used to be whoever is getting me a better deal or whatever is my prior experience, we will go ahead and use the cloud provider that way and move ahead. Now, suddenly, each cloud provider have their own unique type of models that they are coming up with. And it's like, somebody who is using AWS is also starting to use Azure plus OpenAI because the high quality model that they have. Similarly, somebody who was using Azure or GCP is starting to use AWS because, let's say, you have built out Jumpstart, Bedrock, which makes it easier for people to experiment with these models. So this working across cloud is becoming common, and it's fine when you are starting off doing this because you're kind of running demos and building out simple applications. But think about how the complexity is going to scale when you actually start running these cross cloud applications in production, right? So that's another norm that we're seeing, we expect to be established. And lastly, adaptability is core. This space is changing fast enough that almost any of the predictions that we are making about how the world will evolve might not hold true. Maybe we'll have this one super efficient model that's small and it's still able to solve all the tasks. Maybe that's what will happen, or maybe that won't happen, right? We don't know. And we have to ensure that our tech stack, that whatever we are choosing, is basically future safe. So that's roughly what we are seeing in the space. And at this point, again, I wanted to ask a question to you all to just understand the type of challenges that you all are seeing in production as well. Would love to hear thoughts from the audience. What's the biggest challenges that you are seeing using LLMs today? Many folks are talking about costs and engineering related challenges like latency, throughput. Quality of responses is a big one. We'll give 5 more seconds and then end poll. All right. So yeah, 55% of people here are running into cost related challenges. We have a lot of folks talking about data privacy, latency, quality, and to be honest, it's surprising that not a lot of us have faced securing GPUs to run LLM applications. Maybe that's an artifact of the fact that we are a lot of us are in the stage where we are kind of building demos or prototypes using OpenAI. So we haven't, I guess, gotten to that point in our journey as well. But good to know. Let's move ahead. So now, before we launch before we introduce the features that we are building around generative AI, it's important that we set the ground about what is True Foundry, what is the problem that we have been solving for the last 2 years, and then on top of that, we'll release the new features that we're launching. Okay, so True Foundry at the core is a cloud agnostic platform where we leverage Kubernetes to help developers train and deploy their machine learning models, right? That's what we're building at the core. And fundamentally, the idea is that we are abstracting away infrastructure, including your cloud providers, on-prem clusters, etc., so that the developers get a uniform interface to deploy any of these applications. It's secure by default because it runs completely within your cloud. Okay. And as a platform, we have built in a lot of features, a lot of knobs to optimize your overall infrastructure cost. And again, like this comes from visibility that we provide to developers, how we utilize spot instances, how we optimize different parts of your training architectures, and stuff like that, right? A lot of scalability tools are directly built into the applications that you're building, right, where you kind of deploy these applications. And again, a lot of this is coming from our learnings at Facebook, where we used to follow a mantra: you build it, you own it. So you are kind of able to build and deploy things at scale as well. And one of the other things that I mentioned earlier as well, that True Foundry is building in an API-driven way, so that you have adaptability to the type of applications that you've already built in-house, to the tech stack that you have in-house, and the new things that you might adapt as you move forward in the future. And fundamentally, we have been investing as a platform. We have been investing in these 3 modules: a workbench, where a data scientist and ML developer can come and start running their machine learning experiments, right? So like train their models, run hyperparameter tuning jobs, deploy a quick endpoint. So like things like that they want to, like, experiment with, comes together as our shared notebooks and VS Code servers. Besides that, we have a train module, which has a lot of, again, like, common workflows that people have when they're training their machine learning models, or even running batch inferencing jobs, etc., built into that module. And similarly, the deployment module, about how you quickly take an API endpoint, deploy that as a sync endpoint, deploy that as an async endpoint, run your batch inferences and stuff like that. And again, many production ready features like auto scaling, rollout strategies, all those things are built in into the platform, right? So these are the things that we have been building as a plumbing layer for the last 1.5 years as the core platform. Now, today, the part that we are launching is the LLMs module, where effectively we have leveraged the infrastructure that we have built out and built layers after layers that fit very well into the workflow of a GenAI developer, right? And that's the module that we are going to release today. So then introducing True Foundry LLMs. And the goal here is that all the developers are able to build end-to-end LLM-powered applications. Again, not just for demos or prototypes, but something that are ready to launch in production and something that is future-proof. So what does True Foundry LLMs comprise of today? I'll start with that, and we'll end with explaining what are the things that are coming in the future as well. All right. So these are the 3 main modules, 3 core features that we are building as part of that we are releasing today as part of our LLMs offering. Okay. We have the LLM playground, where where it's like a single place where you can come and experiment with all the LLM applications, LLMs themselves, be it open source, be it closed source, be it your own fine-tuned ones, etc. How do you quickly take one of the open source LLMs and deploy that as an endpoint so that you can start using them in your application? And how do you fine-tune these applications to your own data? These are the 3 main modules that we are releasing today. And let's understand this a bit more in detail, and we'll also see a demo of these applications along the way. So LLM playgrounds. And by the way, before I go there, I'll just quickly check if we have questions here, and we can maybe take one question. So do you have any thoughts on how to benchmark the various LLM options and how to do human validation and use the feedback in reinforcement learning? That's a great question, Bob. I'll just give a few things. So in terms of different LLM options, it depends on the main goal with which you are trying to compare them against. Are you comparing the quality? Are you comparing the latency? Are you comparing the cost? So there's a lot of these parts that will come in. But in general, from our standpoint, number one that you could use just for a quick quality check, right? That's how people typically start dealing with. So you would basically use our playground to kind of get compare different LLMs. What kind of responses are you getting? But that's probably not sufficient in the long run. And what you would end up needing to do is prepare a full-fledged formal data set to evaluate your LLMs. In that case, we at True Foundry integrate with tools like Label Studio, where you can have human labelers come in and label the data set. One of the other approaches that we're seeing work out very well is you use LLMs to generate the data set and then use Label Studio to kind of just rank this data set and start feeding into the pipeline. So we have all those integrations built out into the platform. And then on a dashboard, you can see the final responses that you're getting to be able to help you choose which LLMs to go ahead with. Okay. All right. So let's look at our LLM playground, and we'll see some of the features that we are building in this regarding the LLMs. So you could access our LLM playground as part of our platform, where we have model catalog, and along with that we have a playground. Now this is where you can start pretty much asking any questions to you select which model that you want to play around with, right? So you can actually ask a question to any of these models. Second. So, for example, you ask this question, what is generative AI? Let me full screen it. And you ask this question to GPT 3.5 Turbo, and obviously, it's going to come back with a response. When you do this, one of the things that we have built out here is a unified API with which you can actually use any models with a unified API endpoint. So you will tell us the name of the provider, you will tell us the name of the model that you're using, and you can pass in the parameters. And this works consistently across different providers and across different across different open source models as well. So for example, if you're using OpenAI, you could choose any of these models using a consistent interface. We have our own True Foundry's public endpoints available, where you could choose any of the open source models and fit that into the same unified API that we talked about. And same thing, we are continuing to add other providers like Cohere and Anthropic as well. So all these models are available using a unified endpoint. So that's what we refer to as a singular API gateway. And you're able to compare any of the open source and commercial models as well. You can actually add different API keys. One of the other things that we have learned working with our customers is people run into resource rate limits of OpenAI. So if you wanted to have a consistent API interface and you wanted to add multiple accounts, multiple API keys across all of them, you could do that using our settings tab. And that way you'll be able to continuously and seamlessly use these closed source models as well. And besides that, you're actually able to compare the responses of these models as part of our as part of the playground as well. So for example, again, the same question that we asked, what is generative AI? Right? You could ask the same question across, and in this case, we are comparing the response of a GPT 3.5 Turbo against some of the popular open source models, Llama 2 and Falcon as well. Okay. And of course, you can tweak parameters, you can select more models. So all those are available. And if, by the way, one of the other things that you could do is if you're registering your own model as part of some of your fine-tuned models, for example, you could add that as well, and then compare the response of a fine-tuned model with your pre-trained models as well. So actually, I'll show one example that we have here. So at True Foundry, what we ended up doing is responding to many people have seen the results and shown how Llama 2 is not very good with coding and math, right? And we realized that Llama 2 was actually not doing very simple multiplication as well correctly. Okay. So what we ended up doing is we actually fine-tuned a version of Llama 2 where we taught multiplication to Llama 2 using fine-tuning. And in this case, we're using our playground to compare the response where we ask the Llama 2 to just give us a multiplication of 458 times 987. And you would notice the difference in how the multiplied tuned Llama 2 is going through and giving you the result, versus how the out of the box pre-trained version, which gives you incorrect result overall when you use the pre-trained version overall. Okay. So in general, the playground generally allows you for faster experimentation. It allows you to and we are adding more features around being able to monitor your cost and stuff and quickly get to the value here. Okay. Then we have the LLM deploy module. And the deployment module that we are launching today is coming from as part of our model catalog that we have built out. And this is like a single place where you are able to find out all these models that people typically want to use for different use cases. And then we have put in a lot of effort to ensure that these deployments work out of the box. So for example, we want to deploy, let's say, a Llama 213 billion. We have already done experiments where we would suggest which GPUs would work best for this Llama 2. And then if for whatever reason, let's say you did not have access to A100, then we also recommend our second and third best recommended options as well. And you would basically go ahead and choose we again in the general effort towards keeping all the control in the hand of the developer, we expose all the controls to the developers as well. That is what type of endpoints do you want, how many replicas do you want to run, if you want to tweak different resources, etc. So you have all those controls available to you, but we have done a fair bit of optimization to give you really good defaults to get started with, right? And then deploying a Llama 2 within your own infrastructure is as simple as just selecting the workspace and launching a deployment job, basically, right? The moment you do this, you will see that a deployment is getting started, and we are kind of already spinning up a pod on a Kubernetes cluster and going to deploy this model. While this is happening, we have a pre-deployed model that maybe I'll just quickly show you on what are the things that you get when you have these deployments now running on True Foundry, right? So, for example, we select the 7 billion version of the model. So number one, that whenever you deploy a model using True Foundry, maybe you change certain parameters, certain certain configurations, we always keep your changes version control, and deploying to a previous version is a matter of a couple of clicks. You redeploy, and then you're able to manage your you're able to have an API endpoint generated immediately, which you are able to play around with as well. So again, you can ask the same question: what is generative AI to this deployed endpoint? And you basically have the endpoint come up and running for you. And of course, we have full documentation generated about what are the parameters that this can take. You have the curl ready to go, basically. Okay. And besides that, you will be able to monitor the metrics of usage. Of course, in this case, we are not sending a lot of traffic here, but you'll be able to see what's the volume of request, how much CPU, GPU you're consuming. And besides that, we will also tell you again, in an effort to save your infrastructure cost, that do you have CPU over provisioned or GPU over provisioned? So you're able to respond to these suggestions immediately as well. Okay. Now, as part of the deployment, so as you could see that you could really deploy any of these models in a few clicks very quickly. We have done a lot of effort towards not only choosing the right configurations with which you deploy, but we have also integrated with various different model servers and experimented with things like TGI, VLLM, NVIDIA Triton, etc., and figured out that which model actually works best with each of these servers as well. So, and one realization we had in this aspect is not all the servers actually support all of the new models that are coming optimally. So you have to do a bunch of pick and choose and optimizations at that end as well. Besides that, to save your time when you are kind of deploying this model, we are keeping these models cached so that you don't have to download the model every time you want to deploy these models. And we again support a lot of efficient deployment modes, quantized modes deployment, so that you can run it on much smaller GPUs. You are able to run this much faster and stuff like that. Okay, and we have also done a bunch of benchmarking with our deployment product, and we have pretty much the best latency that we see in the market as well, compared to all the other endpoint open source models, endpoint providers. And besides that, we are able to save a lot of cost, which I mentioned earlier as well, comes in because of spot instances and some of the cost visibility tooling that we have built out in the product as well. All right, now let's move on to the third module that we are launching today, which is the LLM fine-tuning. Okay, and I'll again walk you through the workflow of fine-tuning a model on True Foundry, and then after that, what are the things that we are that we have built already, and what are the things that we're building ahead as well. So for example, again, if you wanted to fine tune one of the Llama 2 13 billion models, the workflow is very similar. You would choose a workspace. This is almost like, the infrastructure where your model is getting deployed, and workspaces are pre-configured by True Foundry or your own infra team as well. And you could notice that when you're fine tuning, we actually give you various modes of fine tuning. So quantized LoRa fine tuning as well. And if you wanted to do a full parameter fine tuning, you could do that. And again, you would notice that the choice of GPUs are pre-made for you, that what type of fine tuning would require what type of GPU configuration as well. Okay. And same thing, most of the details are pre-filled in your form. And then the type of, and by the way, this is where we're setting up the job for fine tuning, right? So let's say if you are a developer who wanted to enable a lot of members in your team to be able to run fine tuning jobs, right? You could decide whatever control you want to give to them. What are the parameters that you expect them to tweak? So for example, you could say that obviously you need to bring your own training data, your own eval data. These are the parameters that I allow you to tweak. These are the parameters that maybe you want to turn off, right? So you have a lot of that control when you are launching your own jobs. And similarly, you're able to schedule your fine tuning runs. You're able to update the resources that you need and stuff like that. So it would basically trigger a fine tuning job. And the way this would, I have to just rename this so that it's a unique fine tuning job. And this is where we have set up the fine tuning job with the right infrastructure, right? Now, if somebody wanted to use this setup of fine tuning that you have done and run it, one of your developers wanted to run it for their own data set and all, the way this would work is they can actually go inside a fine tuning job and trigger a job of their own. Okay. And there are a lot of nuances that we have taken care of when we build out. So of course, number one, that you will provide a link to your own data set. This is the standard prompt completion format data set, which could be uploaded to your S3 bucket, GCS, or whatever, even a Google Drive or something. Or True Foundry has its own asset management. You can upload your data there as well. So you would do that. And then typically when people are running fine tuning jobs, they want to first ensure that all their parameters are working right. The job is fine, running fine before they run it for the full data set, right? So there's a very simple thing, you could choose the max number of samples from your data set that you have uploaded, so that we are not going to incur a lot of cost when we are running this, right? Very simple feature, ends up saving a lot of development time, ends up saving a lot of cost, right? And then if you wanted to run different parameter combinations, you have these available. Of course, each of these things that you're seeing on the UI is available with programmatic APIs as well. So you could tweak these parameters, launch different jobs in parallel. We will spin up the infrastructure, manage all of that ourselves, and basically trigger the job for you, right? So you could be running full hyperparameter sweep if you wanted to. Now, as you can see that this job is currently running while we have a couple of other finished jobs. And there's a lot of things that we built out as part of these jobs as well, right? So you're able to track your metrics, your hyperparameters of the fine-tuning jobs. You're able to compare the learning curves of how your model is actually converging when your job is running overall, right? You are able to track the model that actually got generated. And each model itself has what we call as an FQN, or a fully qualified name. And this is the identifier that you can use to deploy any of your fine-tuned models. Everything is version controlled. And besides that, some of the other things that we have built as part of our fine-tuning application is that we have taken care of checkpointing by default. Of course, these are very long-running jobs. It could take anywhere from multiple hours to multiple days. And if something in your infrastructure breaks or the job fails for whatever reason, you don't want to start from scratch, right? So we will automatically checkpoint it and allow you to start the job from those checkpoints as well. And the thing that we noticed in our deployments, our fine tuning is also version controlled. So if you wanted to switch back to a previous version, previous configuration, it's fairly straightforward. We follow GitOps principles. So all the things that you are changing even from the UI are basically converted to a spec file that can be checked into your GitHub, so that you can track every changes that you are making along the way, right? So these are some of the exciting features that we are launching as part of GenAI stack. And just recapping a few things that we saw today. So our fine tuning is parameter efficient, supported by default. You're able to track your job metrics. You're able to automatically checkpoint and resume from those checkpoints. We have already integrated with things like deep speed, and also like if you wanted to do multi-GPU training, if you wanted to split a model across different GPUs, you're able to do all of that. And besides, we are able to improve the latency, the runtime and all using flash attention. So again, like, we are continuing to add these optimizations in our fine tuning as well. So you don't have to build it from scratch, right? And besides, like, once we have covered some of this part in terms of the modules that we are launching, I'm going to show how True Foundry is empowering our current customers to build these applications like RAG, right? But I want to highlight a few things in building these RAG type of applications using our platform, right? Remember, we talked about a bunch of challenges that, like, we expect people might face in the future. Things like LLM itself is not alone. You can't build standalone applications. You have to build out a lot of different components when you're building an LLM applications. You have to have modularity in place. You have to have adaptability in place, right? So that's what I'm going to showcase when, I'm going to, give a demo of how some of our customers have built RAG applications using that. And by the way, the reason we have chosen RAG is because it's a great example where a lot of different components by default have to come together. And even within these components, there's a lot of knobs that, people need to be able to tweak. So again, like, a lot of you might be familiar with how to build a RAG system already. If not, I'll just give a quick overview. So the idea here is that you bring in your own documents, and you need some way of, getting your documents ingested, and run these jobs overall, where you would parse your data, you would split your data, right? You would use a vector database, and you would use, with vector databases, you might need different choices of vector databases that you may want to integrate with, and with what type of LLMs that you want to use as well, right? So a lot of these components come together, and I'll just briefly give an overview of these of how these components come together. Okay. Before I do this, maybe I'll ask one question, that how many of us have already started building applications on using open source LLMs? Because that's the other thing that that adds to the timeline and the complexity of the applications that we are building. So we noticed that a lot of folks who are participating today are using open source LLMs already. Okay. And whoever is not, roughly 30% of people plan to use it within this year as well. Okay. So close to greater than 50% are already using, and close to 30% are planning to use them in the year. So more than 80%, close to 80% of people are either using it or expect to use them this year, which also adds to the complexity of building these applications, right? So let's go back to some of these points and show how True Foundry will help you scale or solve some of these problems, right? So first of all, LLMs are not standalone. So as I mentioned that with True Foundry, one of the things that you can do is you can manage the entire ecosystem that comes together in building these LLM applications. So for example, if you're building that RAG application, you need a small front end where maybe a user can come and play around with, or you need a front end where user can integrate their data sets, for example, right? You need a backend that's orchestrating all the different services that come together in building a RAG application. You may be fine-tuning your models, and you need a fine-tuned version of your model being deployed, right? Then you need some other components, like when you're ingesting your data, you need to take your data, split that into chunks, index that into a vector database. So you have that job that you may want to keep running at a certain frequency, right? And then you may have your embedding models that are running as well. So you want to take care of your embedding models when you are, so for example, in this case, we are using one of the E5 large models. You may have your LLMs that you want to play around with. So a lot of these components kind of come together and help you build the end-to-end system, right? So True Foundry actually helps you deploy each of these different components and maintain them modularly. And even things like if you wanted to deploy a vector database, for example, just briefly show because I've not covered this part, it's again as simple as that you select a workspace where you're going to deploy a vector database. You provide us the, so let's say in this case, we're deploying a quadrant. And it's as simple as you decide that, okay, like, I want to take up a vector database that has 10 gigabytes of storage for whatever reason, right? And then you submit that, and we will spin up a vector database, give you the URL with which you can start integrating that vector database with your applications, right? So that's one thing. In terms of cost, we are doing a lot. We put in a lot of effort to optimize the cost. So I mentioned a few things around, for example, if you're running spot instances. So we will actually show you that if you use True Foundry platform and how we orchestrate spot instances, how much cost are you able to save as you move ahead, right? Similarly, with respect to one of the biggest issues that happens with cost is typically cost is a DevOps concern, and they don't have enough visibility into what each of the services are running. Are these over provisioned? Can I scale them down and stuff like that? Whereas developers really understand their services. So what we have done is we have bridged the gap of exposing the cost related metrics to the end developer directly. So that, if they realize that, okay, this was the demo application, I can scale it down because my CPU is over provisioned, they can simply go ahead, edit the service, scale down the resources that are not getting used, and the cost start getting saved, right? So we are again building, and continue to build more and more knobs like these, right? Everything runs within your own infrastructure. So we are solving for privacy as well. Now, scaling, right? Again, scaling in True Foundry comes by default, right? And again, I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the things that you can do when you are auto scaling, right? So for example, like if you wanted to scale one of your applications, let's say your embedding model, based on your resource utilization. So you could say that if I am using more than this percentage of CPU or more than this percentage of GPU, I want to be able to scale to more replicas, right? We see a lot of our customers wanting, they're in the B2B space and they see most of their traffic in the office hours. So you could say that between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., I want to keep more replicas running, and after that I want to keep less replicas running. So you can scale based on that. Or of course you can also scale based on real-time traffic that you're seeing, that if my RPS crosses a certain threshold, I'm going to auto scale as well, right? Similarly, a lot of production related things about how you roll out different models and different changes. Like maybe you want to do a canary deployment, maybe you want to compare different models. So you can do all of that as part of the platform as well, right? As I mentioned that True Foundry by default is cross cloud. So the way this works is you would integrate all your cloud providers that you're working with. So your clusters running on GCP, AWS, Azure, or even on-prem, you connect us with that, connect those clusters with the platform. And then each of these clusters have an abstraction called workspace built out. And that's what a developer cares about. So a developer is launching a job to a workspace, and that workspace could be on any of the clusters across any of the cloud providers. So that helps you with launching and maintaining your multi-cloud jobs as well. And of course, all the things that we're building literally is API driven. We support a lot of our ecosystem as well. So that way, we help you be able to choose different models as you move along. So yeah, I think I'm gonna move ahead with this. The part that I mentioned about the ecosystem, True Foundry already integrates with all these different vector databases, different application development, tool chain, model servers, so all the cloud providers and stuff, right? And just a quick case study on how one of the Fortune 50 companies that we are working with is currently using True Foundry to build multiple applications. Now, just a quick context, they actually had multiple BUs come to the data science team who wanted to build out a lot of LLM-based applications. And the way they were doing it was kind of taking in one application at a time and maybe contracting it to some agency, or even building out internal teams who were taking one application as a whole at a time. Okay. And of course, they were ending up spending a lot of time and money to build out each of these applications in individuality, I guess, right? The way when they came across True Foundry, the way we helped them overall is they were able to work with open source models much more effectively, which was a pain point that was adding a lot of time to the application building. We had pre-configured pipeline for things like retrieval augmented generation, some of the fine tuning, and they were able to start from that. The overall, the different components that came together along with the platform also help them expedite the deployment and building of these jobs. And one other thing that they really liked about the platform is how they could bring their own code. So while TrueFoundry can provide a lot of different components, they need their own data parsers. They need their own splitting logic because the data is stored in the format that the company has basically, right? They could use those also, their parsers, the splitters, and deploy them as jobs, and then put together these modular components. So for example, one of their use cases ended up building an OCI-based PDF parser. They simply made a microservice out of that, published that on TrueFoundry. And while one application developer ended up building it, 6 other developers ended up utilizing the same parser. So that added, improved their turnaround time basically, right? And the impact of this was such that they were able to actually launch these applications 10x faster. And sometimes even more than that. The cloud cost, they also leveraged the same thing about the platform and were able to reduce their cost. And developers were able to move independently. They did not have to depend on the DevOps team to be able to save this kind, launch these applications themselves. And besides this, there's a few other features that we are currently working on. So GPUs is generally a lot of concern that we're seeing, and to be able to efficiently utilize GPUs is another factor that's going to add towards your cost optimization. So we are working on allowing people to use fractional GPUs. We're going to launch a lot of out-of-box use cases, advanced things around RAG, advanced things around fine-tuning. How do you bring in your flat documents and kind of run different jobs to break it to prompt completion pairs? So we are adding some of that support. In Playground, we are going to add with each API call your latency and cost visibility as well. And of course, world is moving towards agents, and we are going to add more and more first-class support towards agents as well.
In the meantime, wanted to kind of highlight people in the call, we can keep on putting your questions as we are coming to the end of this in the next 10 minutes. So please ask your questions. We'll try to cover them. We'll want you to kind of keep on asking as many questions as possible.
Yeah, please keep asking questions. Maybe I have one other question that I'll ask. In terms of, can you all see my screen? We have had a lot of people who have worked with open source LLMs here. I'm very curious if people here have experimented with different model servers. Okay, so I see that a majority of us have not experimented with different model servers ourselves. So we pretty much use assuming what we get by default in, let's say, Hugging Face or something. So we see 70% folks have not experimented with different model servers, and a few folks have actually. Okay. And if folks have more questions, which library you found useful, I think our team will continue to answer the question. And then we towards the end, we are running into the remember, in the beginning, we told that there's going to be a surprise that we're going to launch only for the attendees today in this call for this private release. This is the part that we wanted to expose. So we are releasing a completely free beta access to our platform to the folks on this call today. And as part of this, you're going to get, one second. Yeah. So you are going to get access to one of the workspaces. Remember, all the deployments happen on workspaces where you can actually go start deploying LLMs yourself, building out applications, fine-tuning these jobs. Of course, this is going to be a community cloud, so like do not use it directly for production, but at least you'll be able to build out quick prototypes directly on the platform. You get actually GPUs as well as part of this workspace. So if you are running some experiments, if you wanted to test out like a fine tuning and stuff, you would get that. And our LLM playground and a docs GPT that I'm gonna show a quick brief demo of moving forward. You will be able to access those as well. Now, if you want to use it, if you after this free access that you get, if you want to leverage it within your company as well, then there is one more thing that we want to offer today. That is, we can actually set up True Foundry completely on your cloud. Okay, so and open up 2 developer accounts for the next 6 months. If you bring your own cluster and set it up yourself, we have a lot of documentation around that. Or 3 months of free access of True Foundry for 2 developers if you want us to set up your cluster and help you run these jobs on your cloud directly. Okay, there's just one caveat to it, that if you want to run this within your own organization, then we ask you to run one of the model deployments from our model catalog. I showed that it was fairly straightforward. You go to the model catalog, click on deploy, and launch an API endpoint before mid next week. So if you do this, we will also grant you access for 2 developer accounts within your own cloud as well.
So while we are here, would request, as we are nearing the end of the time, please fill in this form that we have sent on the chat. Just we'll send it again, and we'd love for you to love to capture everyone who is here so that we can provide the access. So please let us know through the form while we are still here. Nikunj, if you want to take in some of the questions from the audience in the meanwhile.
For sure, yeah. So yeah, so I think just we are getting some responses on the part that is most interesting to people in terms of accessing a demo of the platform. Actually, it seems like many people want the open source model deployment. 67% people also find the playground useful, and a few folks, close to 50% folks want fine tuning and the overall ecosystem that comes together with the platform as well. Cool. It's good to know. It's good to know that this is useful to you all. Now let's take in a few questions here. So Samir says, I cannot see the form. I think Samir, you'll be able to just go through the chat, and also maybe this QR code will also lead you to the right place here. Then we have Srinivas. I see this platform mostly acting as proxy to actual infrastructure. Does this platform also involved after deployment? So Srinivas, actually, you're right. Basically, in some way, the platform is basically allowing you to manage your infrastructure really well, both for training and deployment pipelines, right? But it actually integrates with your existing CI/CD pipelines, right? So when you have launched a certain job, you could actually be integrating with your CI/CD pipeline. You push more code, the new versions of your applications keep getting updated. You have all those versions tracking done. You could be running your retraining pipelines, and you are able to track all of that in the platform. So it's actually supposed to help you throughout the journey, as opposed to the initial bit of just the deployment itself. Okay. And I think folks from our team can be adding more details to it as we move ahead. Navneet, which library you found useful for evaluation of generated results by open source LLMs? Scenario is it needs to be private and completely open source, no OpenAI usage. So when you say which library, do you mean about the library for the models, or you mean for the eval, the eval? Oh, I see. Okay, the eval itself. So things like OpenAI eval and all, basically. Yes. I'm assuming that the question is about what are the different types of eval options that we have explored with, that we have experimented with. Navneet, maybe if you can just clarify that on the chat. Yeah. Okay.
Meanwhile, yes. We are seeing good submissions on the form. We'd request everyone to submit it. It's on the webinar chat. If you go to the last chat that Deepthi has pinged, there you will see the link of the form. it'll be great if you can fill it. And this is not only just for you, but even for your team. So the same access can be enjoyed by also your team members. So please do let us know. And we are seeing some wonderful comments on the chat as well in terms of the demo and the feedback. That is good to know, and really appreciate all the questions coming in as well. So keep that coming. We'll stay here, answer questions for a few more minutes post the 1 hour. So we'll really love if everyone can fill in the form.
Right. So and like Navneet, to just finish answering your question, we have done a bunch of different experiments and benchmarking on the eval, which is we have played around with OpenAI eval library. We have experimented with different generated answers, with our own metrics on the quality and stuff. But this is not an area where we have done a lot of active work ourselves, where we have done a formal evaluation of different libraries and figured out which models would work best, or which libraries would work best, by the way. Zishan asks a question: instead of docs, can we query a data mart? Actually, that's an application that a lot of our customers work with. And the short answer is yes. And there are different ways in which you could be querying your data mart. You can use LLMs to generate queries, and then drive insights on top of those queries. So that's one. The second thing is you can still get some, depending on the type of the data, you can still get context out of your data and feed it to the LLM for it to be able to generate Python code, pandas code to explore your data as well. So that's how most of our customers are currently using working with LLMs and structured data.
Also, some of the folks have asked on the chat with regards to the presentation and the video recording. So we will capture the recording. We have been recording it, as you saw. So we will share the recording to you post the event. We'll also share the presentation, and feel free to share it with your team members or folks in your network. We'll also extend the access code for accessing the free access that Nikunj just mentioned about. Again, good to see a lot of you kind of filling the form. I think we have got good responses. If anyone is left, I would request to do the same.
Cool. I think we will at this point hang around for a few more minutes to answer any further questions that folks might have. I had a query about inference. Is batch? Yes, batch inference is supported. So we have a concept of True Foundry jobs where you could point it to a data set. It could be in your own cloud provider S3 bucket or wherever, and we can run batch inference and report the results as part of our own artifacts or back to your cloud provider file systems and stuff. So yes, it's a first class citizen within True Foundry. So we have someone asking about the docs GPT, and that's a thing that we did not get a chance to cover today, but I'll just briefly show how this works. So the idea here is that it's almost like a no-code abstraction that we have built out for building a quick RAG system, again for demo and prototype purposes here, where you bring in your own data, you pass it to our docs QA framework, and we immediately give you an app here, right? So the way this works is that you could literally be uploading, let's say for whatever launch demo, you could upload any data set yourself. So let's say if I just upload this PDF, you could choose different embedding models. So in this case, we have only enabled the True Foundry enabled model. Okay, so this data is not okay. Okay. So this will basically go ahead and start collection of your own data set, on top of which you'll be able to start asking questions. So right now, this is going to create an index within True Foundry. And once that is done, it will start showing up here as a collection, and you can directly start asking questions. So as part of this, we had done injected True Foundry developer facing documentation And you can see that you can now start asking questions, which is like, what is a service? True Foundry is the developer platform. So you would notice that a service is like an API endpoint that people are running overall. Let's spend 3 more minutes.
Can you maybe unshare your screen?
Yeah. So yes, Zishan, like you could be deploying Supabase as well. Like, again, like, the way we have designed True Foundry is it's supposed to, like, you could practically be deploying anything directly via True Foundry. One of the things that we support is Helm chart based deployments. So you could literally bring in any Helm chart and deploy that using True Foundry and manage that as an application.
So Nirupam has asked about documentation for this and demo videos. So we'll share a few links, but in general, the documentation you can access through our docs page. So I'm sending the link, but we'll share when we send out the event recording, we'll also share like a few demo videos. Awesome.
Awesome. Okay, maybe we'll take this last question. What is the average time to deployment for an enterprise that you have seen? Average time to deployment, in what sense, actually? Sai, maybe if you can clarify the question a bit more. So it really depends on, like, different type of use cases that they're trying to build. To be honest, we have seen like, the enterprise, for example. I'll just give a concrete example. The enterprise that I talked about in the presentation, they were able to build, like, their first 1 or 2 use cases within a week or 2. And then, like, later when they got to like the 4th, 5th use case, they were able to do this within a few hours as well. So it, like, it depends on the complexity of the use case and how where are you in the journey overall. Can we make calls from this to other systems? In general, for sure, yes, absolutely. Like, because this is running within your own infrastructure, within your own VPC, and you have some other services running within your VPC, just like, very easy to make calls to other systems, Nirupam. And in fact, it's supposed to be not a standalone application, but actually supposed to sit well with the other application that you have. Only then it would be truly production ready. So yeah. All right, then.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jason, and a lot of folks who have asked questions as well. So great to have you here, and we'll follow up and circle back with the recording, the PPT, as well as the access for everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.